Hey everybody and welcome back to Split Couch Games. I'm Scott. Some new maps are released for Gears of War 4, so naturally, I'm making a video. Usually I do a walkthrough and help people get situated with some basic strategies for new maps, but the maps for February are remakes, and one of them is a remake of a Gears 4 launch map, so there's not really a point for that kind of video. I know a lot of fans are upset about all the remakes we're getting for this game, and to be honest, I'm a little upset too. However, I do want to show everyone the other side of the argument, so I'm going to briefly talk about how a multiplayer map gets created in the first place, and then I'm going to tie it all together into how that relates to what the Coalition is doing with the Gears of War 4 DLC. Before I start, this is a very broad idea of how a map gets made, and is certainly not the only way developers will go about it, but I'll cover most of the basics, so by the end you should have a pretty good idea of the process. Now let's get right into it. First things first, the developers get in a room and they discuss what they want the map to be. They have to take a lot into consideration when figuring this out. Do they want to promote a certain style of gameplay? What does the community want? Large or small? Bright or dark? Symmetric or asymmetric? And that's just scratching the surface of the decisions that need to be made. There's a lot of them. And once all the discussions are done, they pass it off to a designer. There's usually only one designer per map, so the designer becomes the owner of the map. It's pretty much solely the owner's responsibility to get the map done and shipped. They start by doing a few sketches to get some ideas of what the map will look like, probably starting with a few key areas of engagement. Once they're done sketching, they'll start creating a gray box build of the map. I've heard it called a white box, mass out, and a few other names, but it's basically what it sounds like. They place a bunch of gray boxes to form a very rough draft of what the level will look like in-engine. They'll then start trimming the pieces to form a more cohesive level, add stairs, ramps, paths between the areas, etc. They'll probably render the map and launch into it several times to get a feel for how the design is all coming together. Once the designer feels like they have it in a good playable state, still only in gray box form mind you, they will call for a playtest. They'll hope to get as many eyes on it from other designers, testers, hell, anybody who can provide feedback. They have to sort through that feedback and then figure out how they're going to proceed with the map design. A lot of times they'll get conflicting reports about what people liked and disliked. To give you an idea of what it's like, have you ever disagreed about how good a map in your favorite game is with a friend? That's the kind of information a designer has to sift through and act upon. The designer will make their changes and then there will be more playtests, and hopefully each iteration gets less complaints and less changes need to be made. Eventually, art assets begin trickling into the map. Sometimes the designer is in charge of that, or they hand it off to an artist to make it pretty. That really varies depending on the studio and what they want the designers to be responsible for. Generally speaking, assets from the other parts of the game will be used here, but depending on the feel of the map, all new assets might have to be made. And the more new assets being made, the longer it's going to take, not to mention how much harder the next step is. Once art begins making its way into the map, and a majority of the map geometry is set in stone, the testers really begin digging in on it. Usually one or two testers will go through the entire map with a fine-tooth comb in what's called an environment pass, to make sure that everything is in order. And I mean absolutely everything. There's really too much that they have to do to just list here in this video, but to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, one of the tests they'll run is to make sure each piece of geometry will block a bullet. Imagine going through your favorite map and shooting each and everything in the level, and that's not even a quarter of a standard environment pass. And while that's going on, testers need to make sure that the game types are all functioning properly as well. Most of what I talked about is all happening at the same time, but once all the testing is done, the map is pretty much ready to ship. And again, the process varies from studio to studio, and there's a lot more technical stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm not talking about, but all I have time for is the basics. Now, what does that mean for Gears of War 4 and the Coalition? They're releasing 2 maps a month. This is a constant workload for them, and they're looking to get these maps completely finished at least a month ahead of schedule, just in case there are any last-minute issues. It's a lot of work, and it's kind of tough to do. This is likely why we're getting so many remakes already. With a remake, you're really cutting out a large chunk of the production time. Playtests aren't really needed. If you're choosing a fan-favorite map, you know it's going to play well. For instance, you might not like Gridlock being back for another game, but you knew what you were getting as soon as you saw it in game. There's also almost zero design work. The designer really just has to match a template, and while converting it might take some time, it's pretty easy. In fact, I would say a designer could finish 2 or 3 by themselves in the time it would take for the same designer to finish a brand new map. We also have to take into account that the Coalition is brand new to the franchise. Older maps are a crutch for them as they learn how to design for a Gears of War game. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're getting more remakes early on. Don't be surprised if we stop seeing those soon, so that within the next couple of releases, the Coalition begin releasing maps that they've created on their own, now that they have a few under their belt and they know what they're doing. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Hopefully you learned something, and maybe we'll meet up on the new maps. I hope to see you next time on Split Couch Games.